And so radical self-love is about how becoming so deeply reconnected with my own inherent value has the possibility to shift the world. That is what makes it radical. Not just that I like myself. So I think self-confidence and self-esteem are necessary. They're valuable. That's not what I'm interested in. One, because self-esteem and self-confidence, again, are about your individual journey. And that's great, but your individual journey won't help get me free unless you see it as interconnected to my journey. And that is what radical self-love gets us to.
This is your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 301 with guest Sonya Renee Taylor.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hey there, ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. First, I have to apologize about something. I'm pretty sure that last week and or the week before I had told you about an upcoming conversation about shit that matters with unqualified people on anxiety that me and Amy Smith were going to record. And we did record it. The bad news is I had a massive technology fail and it didn't record the entire episode. Y'all, in 300 episodes, I've never had that happen. And it finally happened. It was with my best friend, Amy Smith. So we're going to have to re-record that. Wah, wah. It's such a bummer. And she's traveling a lot. I'm traveling a lot. Long story short, that episode is going to have to wait several weeks. And I'm anxious to bring it to you. So my apologies. Please have some patience on that. However, I have such a great episode to bring you today with Sonya Renee Taylor. I'm going to get to that in just a minute here. But first, I wanted to give you a heads up about something that is coming on Friday, October 11th. So speaking of Amy Smith, she and I founded something called the Self-Love Revolution in 2012, and we taught a few courses all around self-love. It was this joint project that we did together. And one of those courses was our signature program called the Master's Course. We taught it live at retreats. We taught it live digitally for years and years. And she and I are moving into another different joint project together, and we are retiring the Self-Love Revolution as well as the Master's Course. So it's a digital program that focuses on feeling your feelings, negative self-talk, self-forgiveness, these fundamental topics that are directly related to your self-acceptance and your self-love. We love this program so much. It was a love child, and we are retiring it forever. We're not going to teach it anymore, but we wanted to pass along a savings to you. We're going to offer it at 50% off the digital version of this course for 3 days. It's going to be available for purchase for 3 days, starting on Friday, October 11th. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're going to offer it. So if you're not on my email list where you get my emails, you should be, because we send out some good emails. Super easy to do that. You can head on over to my website and find it, or more easily, you can text the word kick-ass, it's all one word, to 444-999. I know a lot of you are on your phones right now, so you can pause this and go ahead and do that. Text the word kick-ass to 444-999. You'll get subscribed. You'll start getting those emails on October 11th. And I'm so sorry if you're listening to this after October 11th. It's gone. It's retired. So, wah, wah, sad trombone. But speaking of self-love, today's guest is all about self-love. I have been trying to get Sonya Renee Taylor on my podcast for so long. She lives on the other side of the country right now, and I finally tracked her down, had some time with her, and I cannot wait for you to listen to this conversation I have with her. But before that, let me tell you a little bit about her. Sonya Renee Taylor is the founder and radical executive officer of The Body Is Not an Apology, a digital media and education company promoting radical self-love and body empowerment as the foundational tool for social justice and global transformation. Sonya's work has been seen, heard, and read on HBO, BET, MTV, NPR, PBS, CNN, Oxygen Network, and on and on and on, all the way from USA Today, Vogue Australia, Shape.com, Ms. Magazine, and many more. She is a regular collaborator and artist with organizations such as Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Association for Size, Diversity, and Health, and Binge Eating Disorders Association. In 2011, Sonya founded The Body Is Not an Apology as an online community to cultivate radical self-love and body empowerment. The Body Is Not an Apology quickly became a movement and leading framework for the budding body positivity movement. In 2015, building platform to connect global issues of radical self-love and intersectional social justice. Sonya resides between the California Bay Area and New Zealand and continues to tour globally, sharing lectures, workshops, and performances focused on radical self-love, social justice, and personal and global transformation. So without further ado, here is Sonya Renee Taylor. Sonya, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited for this show. I was sort of apologizing to Sonya before we started recording because I felt like I was really loud, gave the loud hi because I've just been really looking forward to this conversation and introducing you and your work to my audience. And I always like to start, I'm just very curious about people's stories, like how they came to, were you evolved from the womb or, because I know you're recognized for your work as a change agent. So can you share more about your journey? Like tell us more about Sonya and the path that led you to being recognized as the woman that you are today.
It feels probably as fuzzy to me as it does to most of the world. I think that I've always been interested in social change. I've always been interested in how do we create the world we say we want. So that question has probably, always existed in me. I was definitely the 9-year-old who was like, we have to stop using styrofoam. It's killing the planet. So there's always been some aspect of me that lives in that. I think though, I think it's more so that this work found me and I was willing to be a yes. So The Body Is Not an Apologies work came about from a poem that I had written called The Body Is Not an Apology. And that poem came from a conversation with a friend who was afraid that she might have an unintended pregnancy and asked me what she should do. And I'm kind of a nosy friend from a place of love, but I asked her why she was having unprotected sex with this casual partner. And she shared with me that she didn't feel, because she had a disability that made it difficult for her to be sexual, she didn't feel entitled to ask this partner to use a condom. And my response to her was, your body is not an apology. And when I said that to her, that's the first time I'd ever uttered those words. It was the first time that thought had ever occurred to me. But when I said it, it felt real. And it felt like there's some kind of bigger truth in that I'm supposed to explore. So first I wrote a poem, and then I started a Facebook page, and then I kept thinking of all these new projects to do under it, and then people became interested. And then before, I looked around and I had created this world and other people were a part of it that was about this idea of radical self-love and about how we live unapologetically in our bodies.
Wow. That is, I love that story for so many reasons. And one of them is I'm a true believer that we get handed invitations all the time.
Yes.
And it's really up to us to take them or not. And I think that if, I don't know, you can believe what you want about purpose and destiny and things like that in the universe. And I do, though, sometimes, especially like things like that story that you just told, if you hadn't taken that invitation, I truly think that somehow around the way it would have come back around in some other way. And it's just what a really beautiful story. And I want to ask you about, can you share how, and I love the term radical self-love and body empowerment are the foundational tools for social justice and global transformation? I know not a very light question, but start from any which way you want.
Yeah. So the reality is that so much of the oppression and injustice and inequity that we see in the world is a result of the ways in which we view and how we treat bodies. And for me, the My access to better understanding my body and my life is the access of radical self-love. None of us came here in a fractured relationship with our bodies or anybody else's body. We came here radically in love with ourselves. We came here thinking that we were perfect just as we were. And we actually thought that about other people's bodies. You've never seen a self-loathing toddler, a 2-year-old who hates their thighs, and you never will, because those are ideas that are given to us about what bodies should be and should not be. And those ideas are not just given to us about our bodies related to size or related to shape. They're related to race. They're related to gender. They're related to age, to physical ability. We have been given messages about what right bodies are and what wrong bodies are. And as we shift those messages by returning to our inherent sense of worthiness in the bodies that we have today, we then start to make the foundation of those beliefs that there is such a thing as any kind of wrong body. We begin to loosen the foundation of that belief in the world, which means that we then loosen the structures and systems that are built on top of that belief. That is how we create global transformation, is by shifting first and foremost what it is that we believe at the core about our own bodies, because it's holding up the foundation of all the other ways that we believe about bodies around the world.
100%. Absolutely, positively. And I want to sort of maybe even take a step back for just a second, because I think that there are some terms that get thrown around in just a personal development world in general. And one of those is radical self-love or just self-love. And
Yes.
I love getting people on here to tell me what their definition of self-love is, because what we see a lot, at least from my lens, which I think is the lens of many, is just this sort of picture of what it looks like. It's sort of like when you Google yoga, it's like it's this white, thin woman, and it needs to encompass so many other things than that. So can you tell us what your definition of radical self-love is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason that we use radical in front of self-love is because self-love by itself doesn't move anything, right? Self-love by itself is just contained. It's you. And I'm here for people's self-love, but radical self-love moves us beyond just you. And that's actually where I'm interested. So the definition of radical means inherent to a thing. It also means at the root or foundation of a thing. It also means proposing radical changes to our government, to our economic, social, and political systems. But the reason why I propose radical self-love is because, one, I believe that we arrived here on this planet as love. We are not, we didn't come here in this fractured relationship, that it is inherent in us, that in order to build a world that works for all bodies, it has to be built on the foundation of love, right? We've tried to build it on top of other things. We built it on top of capitalist notions. We built it on top of communist notions. We built it on top of all these other things, and we see the results those have given us. So that's how we know that doesn't work. It has to be built on a foundation of love. And I'm interested in a love that transforms the political, economic, and social systems of this world. It's those systems that perpetuate inequity and violence, that perpetuate our fractured sense of self with our own being. And so those systems have to change. And then, the last one is thoroughgoing or extreme. And the reality is that every day we are faced with thoroughgoing and extreme versions of hatred for ourselves and in the world. There was just another mass shooting at a synagogue in San Diego.
As we're recording
this. Yes, as we're recording this, right? And so we need the kind of love that is thoroughgoing and extreme in the other way. And so radical self-love is about how becoming so deeply reconnected with my own inherent value has the possibility to shift the world. That is what makes it radical. Not just that I like myself. So I think self-confidence and self-esteem are necessary. They're valuable. That's not what I'm interested in. One, because self-esteem and self-confidence, again, are about your individual journey. And that's great, but your individual journey won't help get me free unless you see it as interconnected to my journey. And that is what radical self-love gets us to.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. So much. Well, and I love that. I think that so much of what we see on social media and just everywhere on the internets around the concept of self-love really is on a surface level. And I think that even that people have such a hard time even just wrapping their head around that. Like, what does this even mean, this journey? And I love that you are, I just feel like if you aren't talking about all of the things that you're talking about from a systemic and political and economic level, then what good is it for?
Who are you helping? Who are you helping?
Right.
What are you changing?
Mm-hmm.
And in the world, in the world, I mean, like, I think that part of what, and this is, I tell this to folks all the time, is like, I'm not proposing the self-love that I often see on, out here in the sort of body positivity realm. I put air quotes around that, but that version of it, looks easy. It's light. It's fluffy. And I'm a proponent that, first of all, nothing grows without discomfort. There's nothing. There's not a seed that has ever cracked from a shell and it was easy. And so I'm not talking about something that's just easy. It's simple, but it's not easy because it requires us to challenge all of these deeply held beliefs that we have come to, have come to shape our world, but also that we avoid because we have all kinds of beliefs about ourselves as a result of having those beliefs. So there's these sort of constant tricks of the mind that keep us locked in these systems. The work of radical self-love is to jiggle the key and try all the keys until we get back, to us.
Okay. Well, speaking of words that get thrown around where people sometimes might not know exactly what it is. So let's talk about body shaming. So start from the very beginning. Can you talk about what it is, who does it, and what are some ways to, I guess, just from a general sense, overcome it?
Yeah. So I think we all do it. If you've been indoctrinated into a system, if you grew up in a world that told you that some bodies are good bodies and some bodies that are bad, some bodies are bad bodies, and that we should judge those bodies that are bad bodies, then you will probably body shame someone. You will walk down the street and have a judgment about what they look like or their size, think that they should be doing this or doing that. These things are so deeply embedded in the way that we operate in the world. So when you walk down the street and and you're like, she shouldn't have wore that. That's not flattering. That's body shaming. When you're at home talking about your own body, my skin is disgusting. That's body shaming. Certain, parts of India and Africa, one of the highest selling products is skin lightening cream. Right. The idea that that I should chemically make myself lighter is a function of body shaming. And so there are all of these ways in which we shame bodies. I mean, there are subtle, really insidious ways. So, for example, there's a dynamic called what we call inspiration porn, where people post photos of disabled folks doing regular things they do every single day, just saying like, I'm so, if they can do it, then I can get out of bed too, right? Which is this idea of positioning them as superhuman for living their everyday life in the body that they have. Right? Those kinds of things. There are insidious small ways we do it every single day. The way to get out of it is first and foremost to really notice it in yourself. And these are things that I talk about in my book, The Body's Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love. And in the back of it, I have a 10 tools, the Radical Self-Love Toolkit. And one of those, the first tool is called Dump the Junk. And then the second tool is called Curb Bad Body Bad Mouthing. And these are all about ways that we start to notice messages that we're taking in and notice the messages that we're speaking over ourselves. So just begin to raise, like every time I believe in give yourself a tip jar. We're a body shame jar. Every time you say something negative about yourself, you have to pay yourself. And then you have to do something really kind with that money at the end of the month, right? And so
or you judge someone else,
or you judge someone else.
So whose thighs are the biggest.
Exactly. Anytime we find ourselves participating in the system of body shame, we can bring it to our consciousness, which is what allows us to then do something about it, to do a different action.
Yeah. Just notice. That's what I ask people to do, is just notice and then watch if you're kind of beating yourself up for that and then feeling like shit about yourself because you've been participating in it. Like, this is what we've all been taught. This is what we've all been taught. I think especially as women. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever been in a dressing room. What's that department store that I grew up on the West Coast, so I don't think that they had them over there, but where it's just one big dressing room.
I don't know.
What I'm talking about?
I don't know.
There's some department store where this is
I was like, they don't have separate doors? What?
No, it's just like one big room. And like, you just go, it's like Filene's or something. I don't know. But I remember going into one of those with my mom and my aunt when I was a little girl. And it was like the first time I had ever seen like, women and the amount of like modesty that was going on. And I remember thinking like, is this like what we do?
Right. Well, and it is what we do. It's totally what we do. It's this, like we will go into a dressing room and with our friends and, we'll be like, oh, I look horrible. I look like a cow in this. And the other person will say, no, you don't. I'd look like a cow, but you look amazing. And then we go back and forth bartering shame against ourselves in an effort to like flatter our friends. And then we call this friendship. We call this camaraderie. This one-upping body shame. And
I had a client once who she went on this vacation with like a group, like a bunch of couples every summer. And about 8 or 6 weeks beforehand, she said every year it was like this group text message started about diets, who's going to lose 5 or 10 pounds. And she said, I'm so tired of it. So I challenged her and I said, what if you had a very loving, call it out lovingly with your friends and say, you know what, how about this year we do something different? And I don't want to hear about anybody's
diet. Right. I don't want to hear about your body. I don't want to hear about your diet.
And I have this is like a friend of a friend. I don't know this person. And so I don't even know if this is true, but this is like the best idea. I heard that there was this woman who created a group text with like 3 or 4 of her closest friends, and they would send nudes and selfies back and forth to each other and just like applaud the shit out of each other.
Yeah. I just saw a post about this on Facebook yesterday, a friend who was starting what they're calling the thirst trap thread, which is basically just like a private WhatsApp group where they send each other like sexy pics all day and big each other up about how sexy they are. And I was like,
you have to really trust those people. But
yes, you do before you end up on the internet and a site you don't mean to be on. But
just the difference beautiful. In those two stories.
Yes, that there's something beautiful about saying, I would rather spend my time collectively affirming each other than collectively telling each other that we're not good enough.
That can move mountains, y'all.
Yes, it can, and it will shift your relationship, and it will shift what you all feel like what is possible. All of a sudden, you have a group of people who are not, going through, the diet cycling situation every year, which is exactly what that sounds like. It's like every year we're back on how we didn't do the thing last year and how we're feeling, as opposed to like, look at what we're amazing at. Look what is phenomenal about us, and what are we growing in this space of phenomenalness?
Yeah.
I feel like that's what's juicy. And to your other point about like not feeling shame for having participated in this system, in the book we talk about this idea of meta shame. It's shame for being shame, right? Which is such an exhausting ass, exhausting ass way to live. The reality is each and every one of us was, just as you said, born into this system with all of its messages about who we should be and who other people should be in their bodies. It is work to de-indoctrinate ourselves. We are not bad people for receiving the message. And I judge our characters when we know that we're receiving a message that's harmful to ourselves and others and choose not to do anything about it. That's where a moral failing comes in, not at the fact that we have it. We all have it.
Yes, to that. And I mean, it's, I think, people go through this drama a little bit, when we sort of open our eyes to the indoctrination and the cultural messaging that we all received. And then it's like, everyone's kind of looking around like, what do we do now? And not wanting to say the wrong thing and not wanting to talk about it wrong. And it's like, it's going to be messy. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to continue to do harm one way or another, but just start with the realization and the mindfulness. I mean, even just the conversation that we were just having about paying attention to the shaming that we do, even on an internal basis, to ourselves and to other women, to other people, and just take a look around. That's, I think, what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, yeah. Like we call it in the book, we call it a thinking, doing, being process. The first thing that we have to do is learn how to get intimate with our thoughts. And we don't get intimate with our thoughts because, I mean, there's a lot of trash up in these brains of ours. But we are not our thoughts, and as soon as we're able to be like, I am not my thought is a thing that's happening inside of my head. It doesn't define me, which means that I can actually look at it with some level of objectivity and decide, is this serving me and is this serving the world? And if not, then I can be at the doing phase of change where I can say, oh, I have efficacy in this moment. I can do something different. And the more that we become conscious of our thoughts and actively choose to do something different, we become different people. That is the process of being a different human in the world.
And I'm a firm believer, like that's your first step. You have to be in that place first.
Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to look, willing to look.
You have to be willing to get curious and look and pay attention.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you said something before, is what are your thoughts on the body positivity movement? Or did I just open up a whole big old can of worms?
Oh, no, I don't mind talking about the body positivity movement. I'm like, what do I think right now?
It means well.
There you go. There you go. I'm like, the body positivity movement is a nice white lady. Literally. Like literally the body positivity movement is a nice white lady. And the reality is that, historically, certainly for people in marginalized and disenfranchised bodies, for me in this fat Black body, nice white ladies have not always been safe, And so the reality is that it has become a movement. First of all, I think that we have to be honest about where it started. The body positivity movement started as a fat liberation movement. It started as a movement to stop stigma and hatred against fat bodies. And that got sellable. And anytime that something gets sellable, it gets co-opted. And so then it stopped being about the liberation of fat bodies in an oppressive society. And it started being about, how can we sell you a product by helping you feel good about your size 14 jeans? And that is what it became. And in the ways in which it is completely apolitical is where I think it is the most harmful, is that it isn't rooted in an idea that says there are systems and structures that thrive off of our disconnection and disenchantment with our bodies. And those systems and structures are not just harmful, but deadly to some people's bodies. And until we create a world where we can feel positively about all bodies, where we feel so positively about bodies that a cop never jumps out and shoots a 12-year-old Black boy playing with a play gun, until we can create a world that feels so positively about bodies that no one ever walks into a mosque and kills Muslim folks because they're coated in brown bodies, or Sikhs, until we've created that world, then we don't really have a body positive world. And if the movement of body positivity isn't trying to make that world, it is the same capitalist, cis, heteropatriarchal oppression that already exists.
And when, I'm just kind of thinking of some other examples when people can, when fat people can go to the doctor and feel comfortable doing so.
Right. And get a diagnosis that isn't, sorry, whatever's going on with your kidneys, lose weight.
And that's the answer to everything.
And that's the answer to everything, right? And until we create a world where the judgments of bodies do not leave people under-resourced, disenfranchised, and dead, we have not made a body positive movement. And if your body positivity isn't intersectional, isn't looking at all of the ways that we live in bodies, the intersections of our identities, and if it isn't working to make it possible for all of those identities to thrive, whose body is it positive for?
Yeah, right. Whose body is it positive for? Yeah. Well, I'm curious also about, because you have a few workshops through the Body is Not an Apology platform.
Yeah.
And one of them is Body Hate to Body Love in 30 days. So is that the same thing that you were talking about when you gave us a couple of ways to radical self-love that's on your book, or is this something different?
So no, that is that's rooted in the 10 tools to radical self-love. And so what we do in that workshop is first talk about how did we go from this, from being these toddlers who are in love with our bodies and in love with other people's bodies to being in these systems of self-hatred, in our own personal systems of self-hatred. And then we talk about a body shame origin story. When's the first time that we uh, started to believe a message that something was wrong with our bodies? What was that about? Who did it come from? What did we learn? And then we tie that to this larger system. Let's not just talk about, like we stop you in your body origin story, and then we say, let's talk about how much the beauty advertising industry makes a year. Right? And then we start talking about what are the political makeups of our systems, and like how many women have ever been governor in the United States compared to men. And we start talking about the visible ways that we see inequality, and we tie that back to these body shame origin stories. And then we say, all right, I've painted a gruesome landscape of of this just system and structure of body shame and what we call it, the Body is Not an Apology, body terrorism. What can we do today to start moving out of that? And those are those 10 tools that we start to talk about. 10 tools that you can practice, that are practical, that are easy, that are simple, that can move us out of that. And so that's what that workshop is. And we've recently just launched our 10 Tools Intensive, which is a 4-week e-course that takes you from just conceptually thinking about these tools. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I could do that. To a daily practice over 4 weeks that incorporates all of those tools and builds on what I like to say, exercising that radical self-love muscle. So it becomes an intuitive thing to use.
Amazing. Amazing. So yes, those links will be in the show notes for everybody. And you actually have 2 books, The Body is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love, and a book for girls called Celebrate Your Body and Its Changes to, the ultimate puberty book for girls. And I have one last question for you. And that is around, I follow you on Instagram, which everybody needs to go follow Sonya on Instagram right now. You have something called Bad Picture Monday.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about that?
Yes. So Bad Picture Monday is probably the Body's Not Apology's oldest project. We started it right when the Body's Not Apology was still a Facebook page. And I was like, what would I had all these pictures I was constantly untagging on Facebook because I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you caught me at this angle. Look at me, blah, 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 blah. And I realized that it was my own regular way of being in a body shame relationship with myself. And I was like, what would happen if I challenged myself to, to learn to live with and love me in every image? And so I was like, what would it look like if we changed our Facebook photos, our Instagram photos, our profile pics to a photo we hate every Monday? Here's the point, right? First of all, is that body shame and body terrorism in the system thrives off of telling us that there are some ways that our bodies should look and some ways that our bodies shouldn't. And that we should be invisible when our bodies do not conform to what society says is beautiful or what we say is beautiful, right? And that invisibility is marginalization. That invisibility is oppression, right? And so we actively, one, challenge ourselves to reconceptualize what we call beautiful in ourselves. And then 2, to challenge the notion that there is any way that our bodies could show up on this planet that doesn't deserve to be seen and valued. That is a radical exercise. And over the process, the 7 years that I've been doing Bad Picture Monday, I don't really have bad pictures anymore. When I see them, they're just me. And
they're just pictures.
It's changed the way that I see myself.
Amazing. Amazing. I love that so much. I love that so much. I want to marry it. Oh, Sonya,
marry it.
I'm proposing this week. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your message. And everybody needs to run over to the show notes and grab copies of your book. Where do you want people to go to find you online?
You can go to my website. If you just want to dig deeper into my work, go to SonyaReneeTaylor.com. If you want to dig deeper into The Body is Not an Apology, we are a digital magazine and education platform. You can go to thebodyisnotanapology.com, and you can follow both The Body is Not an Apology and myself on all the social medias at either The Body Is Not an Apology or Sonya Renee Taylor on all of the platforms. But I really want folks to go to this 10 Tools Intensive, buy the book, and then do this 4-week e-course alongside of it. And you can find that at thebodyisnotanapology.com.
Thank you so much for that. And everybody, thank you so much for your time today. I know how precious your time is, and I'm so incredibly grateful that you choose to spend it here with me and my guests. Thank you again, Sonya, for being here. And until next time, ass kickers, I will see you all out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.